Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of In the Know. All right, so if you recall, last week we did a quick preview podcast for the Raptors game, and we're back to do something similar here with Gerald Bourguet, who is the lead writer for PHNX Sports. I feel like we did a little bit together during the playoffs last year, so good to have you on our side of the fence here. How's it going?
It's going well. It's a little confusing time for covering the Suns, but other than that, it's been good.
Good. Well, we're excited. Should be a couple of fun games this series or this weekend between the Pelicans and Suns at the top of the Western Conference. So didn't know if I'd be saying that at this time of the year, but we're excited. But yeah. So let's get into it, man. What's been up with Phoenix this year? I mean, I feel like so if we take us through the entire timeline, back to the summer, I'm thinking about how, and I'm guilty of this as well. So I'm going to just say it that. I was like, well, there are a lot of bad vibes coming out of Phoenix right now, and I feel like they're an easy target to say maybe they're not going to be as good as they were last year. Mm-hmm. However, the Phoenix Suns had different ideas, and we're back where we were last year. They're close to the top. They've been at the top of the Western Conference for a while. Obviously, these next couple of games will really help to establish the number one seed after the weekend. But what's the season been like from kind of the very start of preseason through to now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it, like they were a candidate for regression, and I'm not going to pretend like I knew that this team was going to be, as good as last year, and they haven't been, obviously. But I do think I was always of the opinion that if they could get past all of the off-court turmoil and drama and headlines from the summer, that they would be fine. And they had a lot to deal with, not even just like the DA contract stuff, but you're talking about the Robert Sarver investigation. You're talking about Kevin Durant trade rumors and every guy on the roster basically seeing his name in a trade rumor over the summer. It was just, and then Jay Crowder sitting out training camp, like it was one blow after another. But the roster was largely intact. They added a couple of guys to kind of the end of the rotation that have been useful. So I'm not surprised to see them rolling. I kind of thought it would be Suns, Pelicans, and Warriors, some combination of 1, 2, and 3 in the West. So 2 of the 3 have held up their end of the bargain so far. They've been a top 10 offense, top 10 defense, and they've been doing it despite the fact that Chris Paul has kind of taken a step backwards in production this season. So you can't really say enough about Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges having a career year, DA kind of starting to find the consistency. There are still definitely flaws with this team and things that might hold them back in the playoffs. But in terms of regular season success and just being a good team that not many teams will want to face in the playoffs, I think the Suns have already established themselves as that.
Yeah, so I guess for Pelicans fans who maybe haven't seen them much besides the one game we played earlier in the season, what's jumped out to you beyond the obvious? So you mentioned Booker and Bridges and Ayton, but they have a really good record, and so there's got to be more to it than that. What's been different, kind of from the playoff series to now? Any surprise contributors? What's kind of been maybe unexpected for Phoenix?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that, even before Chris Paul got hurt and missed 14 games with the heel soreness, like he kind of took a visible step backwards in terms of contributions and just role as far as being on the ball. Like that's what he's done for the first 17 years of his career. And now he's kind of playing off the ball more, which is part of why his numbers are so far down. They've been putting the ball in Mikal Bridges' hands a little bit more, Cam Johnson before he got hurt, and letting them kind of create, because Monty had said over the summer, watching Golden State, watching Boston, they have 3, 4, 5 guys you can swing it to, and at any point in time, they can get you a bucket. And the Suns didn't really have that in the playoffs last year. So I think they're trying to grow that with Mikal, with Cam Johnson. So that's been one of the biggest things that stood out to me. Book has been Book. He's been having a career year scoring wise. He's been really good at handling double teams, better than he ever has in his career. And the bench has been better than expected too. I will say that, they've dealt with a lot of injuries. Like Cam Johnson goes down, what was it, like 6 or 7 games into the season. Chris Paul goes down 10 games in. They're starting campaign and Torrey Craig, and those guys have been great in starting roles. They've had Damian Lee come in and just shoot lights out. Like the guy has never missed in the fourth quarter since he put on a Suns jersey. It's insane. Josh Okogie's given them good minutes. Jock Landale's been a great backup center. So it's a lot of little pieces. They don't have anybody that's really moved the needle compared to last year in terms of looking ahead to what they're going to need for a playoff series. But as of right now, they've been able to just kind of keep chugging along despite having some pretty significant guys miss time.
Yeah, I think there's some good and bad in that, right? And the good is that if you have a little bit from everyone, it feels more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side, I guess, is when you shorten up the playoff rotations, does that, who gets cut out, and does that carry forward? And so will be certainly good to watch moving forward. Is what's going on this past week, past couple of games, because I feel like there was all this hype around these couple of games coming up, and there still is, because they're both at the top of the Western Conference, despite what's happened this week. And so I don't know. I mean, the Mavs it seemed like this weird bugaboo for the Suns, but and Boston's obviously incredible. But I mean, anything you're concerned about beyond just like a couple of game aberration? They played Luka again, and then they played the best team in the NBA. Is it just kind of noise, or is it more concerning from a bigger picture perspective?
I think it's a little bit concerning. It's only 2 games in December, and you look back to last year, like the Warriors were down by like 40 some at one point in the playoffs and went on to win the title. So it's not something that, is indicating, oh, they're cooked or whatever. But I do think it speaks to how bad A, Dallas is as a matchup, B, how good the Celtics are, and C, how this team can kind of get itself into a place of PTSD when they get down early. Because like, I hate to keep bringing up Game 7, and it's all anybody, the jokes are flying when they are down, and it's understandable, like they're warranted. But like, I do think there is kind of a little bit of a mental block if they trail a good team early. They let issues kind of compound themselves, and they let things snowball, and suddenly you look up and it's halftime and they're down 26, 27 points, and it's like, what just happened in that quarter? That happened in Game 7. It happened in the season opener too, and people kind of forgot about it because they were able to come back and win that game against Dallas and kind of exercise some demons. But then they go into Dallas this week and the same thing happens. So it's like, okay, they've got a mental block with that team. And then Boston comes in and you're like, okay, they'll get back on track. This team, dating back to 2020, 2021, they have the best record coming off a loss in the NBA. So you're like, okay, they always get up for the big games. They're going to get up for this one. And they just get gobsmacked. Like I was not expecting that at all. Again, it speaks to how good Boston is and how there might be some very real demons in terms of, okay, if they find themselves in this familiar situation, I don't know if they're going to be able to play themselves back out of it. They don't have a Jay Crowder or a JaVale McGee, guys who kind of have that dog in them. Like they're not guys that are going to come in and drop 20 or 30 points and turn a game around, but they have that toughness. And I don't know if the Suns have that guy right now that brings that edge that they need. So it is something that's a little concerning going into this Pelicans matchup. It's kind of a bummer that, Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones are going to miss the game, because from a Suns perspective, at least, we were looking at these games like, okay, are you going to show us that you care? Like, is this going to be a bounce back game, or are you going to lose against a Pelicans team that's been really hot over these past couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's certainly tough. And one thing I mentioned yesterday was obviously Brandon Ingram, missing him is pretty self-explanatory in how important that is. But I think Herb Jones has an exponentially higher role against a team like the Suns because of how good of a bucket getter Devin Booker is. I mean, he's going to draw fouls, and that's kind of thing is that you need reinforcements. So you need Herb, you need Dyson Daniels, you need Najee Marshall. All these guys have to play a role in a game like this. And to not have the guy who is Herb, it just puts you in a tough spot. Dyson Daniels has been starting. I imagine he draws the Booker matchup to start. And look, he's a rookie too. And Booker's going to draw fouls on the best defenders in the league. And I feel like rookies will maybe not get the benefit of the doubt that some other tenured players might. And so I wouldn't be shocked that Dyson picks up a couple early fouls and you got to go to Najee, and things can, and Najee's been playing great this year. So this is not a knock on Najee. It's just like you need to throw bodies at a guy like Booker. And so I do think it's going to be pretty impactful for them. But they've been able to keep things afloat against, it's been a homestand. It's been against not like a mixed bag of competition. So it's not like they've been blowing the doors off of really good teams, but they've been playing well. And so I think it's going to be the Suns will be a new and interesting test for them. But talking more about that game, or the couple games, I mean, what do you have your eye on given, let's just, I don't really know what's going to happen with Jose Alvarado. He's a big question mark, but I think, he's questionable. He had that rib injury last game. You hope he plays because it sounded like it wasn't too serious of an injury, but they've been cautious with players throughout the year. I think, my expectation is that he misses Friday and plays Sunday, but no idea really. But anything in particular you're focusing on for this matchup, given who's available for both sides?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Alvarado question is a big one because they just welcomed Chris Paul back, and his first game back was that Celtics beatdown. So to follow that up with Grand Theft Alvarado would not be fun for him, I would imagine. But looking at the matchup as a whole, like, we haven't gotten to see a ton of Zion against the Suns over the last few years. Obviously haven't gotten to see a ton of Zion against a lot of people, but like the Suns, like, he's been playing phenomenal based on the numbers that I've seen over the last handful of games. So he's going to be a big question mark because do they even have the type of physicality to keep him from getting to his spots? Like, very few teams do as it is. And that's a tough matchup when you don't have Jay Crowder, when you don't have Cam Johnson to kind of spread the floor on the other end and make him work on that end. So that's definitely something I'll be keeping my eye on. And also, honestly, Devin Booker, like you mentioned it, that not having Herb Jones is a big loss in terms of slowing him down, having another leading guy to kind of throw at him. But Booker has put up back-to-back duds in games against MVP candidates. Like, we were all looking forward to Luka versus Book. Luka took that handily. Same thing with Tatum. Tatum took that handily. So, like, you got to bounce back against the Pelicans team that's missing its best perimeter defender. Like, you kind of just have to. So there is a little bit of pressure heading into this, not back-to-back, but I guess it's like road and road with a day in between. Like, there is a little bit of pressure on the Suns team because you are playing the new number one team in the West, the team that just unseated you because you decided not to show up for a week. So this should be a fun one, especially, the playoff matchup last year. The fact that the first game was kind of shorthanded as well. Like, I would like to see, hopefully maybe Sunday or sometime, their fourth game against this team of the season is like next week too. So I would like to see at least one matchup between these two teams fully healthy, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think so. I was just looking before those two duds of games happened. I mean, I was looking at the Western Conference, kind of the players of the week candidates, because Zion was up there, right? The Pelicans went 4-0 prior week, and there was a good argument for him. Anthony Davis ended up winning it, but Booker was right there too. I feel like someone in my replies to a tweet I said about it was like, "What about Booker?" I was like, "That's a great point." Devin Booker had a phenomenal week, and he was probably like, Zion and Book were probably right there behind AD for Player of the Week honor. So he went from really being phenomenal in the week before to having these two tough games. Is what make me so nervous, because I feel like Book having 3 bad games in a row, especially with Herb out, I don't put a lot of odds, a high percentage chance on that. And so the Pelicans are going to have to figure out what to do. And specifically with Zion, I think it's Jay Crowder probably isn't your ideal defender for a player like Zion, but he's probably like he's a good option, right? He's not as someone who he doesn't take shit from anyone, and so he's gonna stand up to Zion and at least make Zion take it from him essentially. Yeah. And so it will be interesting to see what the Suns do to combat that. Any other kind of matchups? Anything else that really you think? I feel like Mikal had a couple of really big games in the playoffs against the Pelicans, and you've talked about how he's been, up leveling his. I think the versatility of his offensive game, and I think that's something the Pelicans have to be paying attention to, because it's easy to lose sight of that when you're focusing so much on Booker. And so, you kind of expect him to have a more elevated offensive role against the Pelicans, or is there anyone else that's really going to have a disproportionate role against a team like New Orleans?
Yeah, I would say so, because I think what he was able to do in the playoff series last year against the Pelicans, he had those couple of really fantastic games, was impressive, especially because on the other end, he's alternating between guarding Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. And, Mikal has done a really nice job on McCollum in their matchups over the last couple of years. He's been, I don't want to say a McCollum stopper, but he's definitely limited his effectiveness. So if he doesn't have to worry about Ingram in this Friday matchup, I would expect him to have more of an increased role. And that's kind of what his role has been this season. He's been playmaking a little bit more. They've kind of played Chris Paul off the ball a little bit more to allow him to kind of grow in that capacity. And he's been really good at getting to his spots in the mid-range as well. Monty's compared him to Glenn Robinson in terms of a guy that can kind of get to his spots and kind of elevate. Yeah, it's an interesting comparison, but yeah, so I would imagine, especially because he has not played well in the last 2 games either. That's kind of what stood out is like, okay, Book is going to have off nights. Every superstar does, but is Bridges going to be the guy that can pick up the slack? So far, the answer has been no, but he's still having a career year overall. He's really efficient. He's still a great defender. So that is something I'm going to keep an eye on because, again, without Herb Jones, like, okay, who is going to combat all that length on the defensive end when Mikal gets the ball?
One last question for you. What's the road lifestyle of the Phoenix Suns like? Because the game on Sunday is a 2:30 Central Time start in New Orleans. And so I'm a little curious because I was worried about this for the Pelicans game a week ago. And now we've got a matinee game in New Orleans with Phoenix coming to town. And so we know they're going to be in New Orleans for the entire weekend. So any concerns you have there about Phoenix Suns doing a little too much Saturday night, or are they too much of a veteran team at this point? They know to take things seriously.
I mean, a little bit. There's got to be a little bit, like, as much as I want to say, like, these guys are all professionals for sure. They can drink and go out and play basketball in a way that I can no longer do. But, like, these are 25, 26-year-olds in New Orleans for a Saturday night. That Sunday first quarter might be a little rough. We'll see.
I'm hoping it's like 70 degrees and beautiful in New Orleans on Saturday. Just any roadblock, anything possible. And if the Pelicans, like if you told me the Pelicans were to split these 2 games, I would be more than satisfied given the injuries the Pelicans have. But maybe they get the doors blown off on Friday night, and then the Suns take it easy and enjoy themselves on Saturday, and the Pelicans return the favor on Sunday. We'll see. A lot of possibilities here.
That is entirely possible. I wouldn't put it past them.
All right. Well, Gerald, really appreciate you joining. Take a second, tell folks where they can find your work and what you've been up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter at Gerald Bourguet. You can read, if you're interested in Sun stuff, all my stuff on gophnx.com. And if you are interested, we do pregame and postgame stuff. So we'll be doing that for the Pelican stuff all weekend. If you are interested in hearing the other side of the spectrum, you can follow our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's the PHNX Suns podcast.
Awesome. Well, it was fun joining you guys during the playoffs last year. It's really good stuff. So everyone should go check y'all out. But before we wrap, we'll plug our sponsor, DraftKings. So the NBA season's heating up, and it means there's no better time to bet with DraftKings Sportsbook, who's an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers can bet $5 pregame moneyline on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. So download the app now, sign up with code BOOT, B-O-O-T, and place a $5 pregame moneyline bet on any NBA team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's code BOOT, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services can be accessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-426-2537. Gerald, again, thank you. This has been your kind of abbreviated in the no episode to preview the Pelican Suns 2 games this coming weekend, and hell, even the 3rd game coming up in like a week or so. But Gerald, again, thank you so much for joining. Folks, we'll catch you next time.